So today I want to tell you two stories. One of them is short and funny, and I think you'll get a kick out of it. The other one is ugly, and it's sad, and apparently it's just normal nowadays. I don't know. What I'm talking about with this first story is mob mentality. And that's basically the idea that one person in a vacuum will behave in a decent manner. But if you get a group of people, things can escalate to the point where anyone in the group will behave in a bad way that they wouldn't on their own. And I got to see that play out, and I was kind of shocked by the behavior I saw. So I'm going to tell that story, and then I'm going to talk about what I see as the wider implication of it. So this story is about my son and working as an umpire this week. And it's actually something that's been going on for a long time. So let me try to give you the quickest possible backstory. Since my son was 4 years old, he's played every sport he could get signed up for. He's not a particularly gifted athlete, but he was a hard worker, really smart, dedicated team player, and just loved the game. And because of that, we've spent a lot of time at sporting events, and specifically baseball. He plays league baseball and travel baseball and all-star baseball and fall ball, and we've been all over the country to watch him play baseball. And we've seen a lot of crazy behavior. And at the beginning of it, my wife was like, you know what? I don't like being involved in all the drama. Let's sit out in the outfield away from everybody. We can't hear what's being said up there. They can't hear us. We'll sit back there, and it was peaceful and quiet. We usually sat way down the first baseline or out in the outfield and watched the games. And now my grandson's playing Little League. You guys have seen him in some videos. He's 7 years old. Spending a lot of time with 7-year-olds lately. And I coached youth sports the whole time my son was growing up. 7-year-olds, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they're just little kids. They're not emotionally prepared to handle difficult situations. And it seems like we forget that when we go to these sporting events, that ultimately it doesn't even really matter who wins. We're there to watch some little kids play. So I told you my son's played baseball all this time. He just graduated from high school. He was an all-conference catcher. He was a catcher, pitcher, shortstop most of his life. But mostly he was a catcher, and he saw every pitch of every game right down the pike. And he was pretty good at it. It was one of the joys of my life to watch him play ball. Now he's graduated, and he wants to coach baseball and be a math teacher. And I think that's pretty awesome. But I told him, just remember how ugly we saw people treat the umpires. But I'm pretty far removed from youth baseball. We've been at high school baseball. We've been at select 15 and under travel baseball over the last 4 years. It's all, I'm thinking, man, we're going to go down and watch these little kids. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I haven't been going. My wife and I, we haven't been going to watch these games, but my son still lives here, and he comes home at 10 p.m. after finishing umpiring these games, and he said, these parents are crazy. These coaches are crazy. You wouldn't believe the things they say to me. And we talk him through it a little bit and say, you know, that's just part of it, and tell him that ultimately you have the authority to eject someone from the game. But the problem is, even though he's now turned 18, he's umpiring with a couple of 15-year-olds. And everyone who's screaming and yelling at him is my age. And there's 40 of them, and there's one of him to try to control the situation. But I didn't think a whole lot of it. I didn't care that much. But to tell him, you know, that you're going to have to deal with this, talk to the league president, warn the coaches, you're going to have to deal with it. And he's been dealing with it all season. And the reason that he's there every game and he's usually the behind the plate umpire is because the league feels like he does a great job, but it's also because they can't pay that much. And adults, grown men my age, who love baseball and enjoy umpiring, will not come down there and umpire 9 and 10-year-olds for $25. And it's not, what would I have to pay you to say, for the next couple hours, a bunch of people you don't know are going to scream and yell at you and say all kinds of insults, and there's not much you can do about it? I mean, what would it take for you to pick that up as a side job? It's why these leagues can't get umpires. And again, I want to tie this in to some other things, but the concept is being proven out by what I saw tonight at a Little League baseball game. So we hear from a couple other people. All-Stars have started. So that's a higher level of competition, but the kids are still 9 and 10 years old, but it's All-Stars. I get people sending me messages, you wouldn't believe the way they're treating your son at these games. The things they're yelling at him, the amount of yelling and just crazy behavior. And people are telling us that. We decide, you know what? Let's go. We're on our way to the game. My son sends us a message, said it's going to be a rough night. Some lady just cornered me and wouldn't let me through and was pointing her finger in my face and telling me I better do this and better do that. Outside of the game, outside of the field, confronting him, trying to make sure that the game goes their way, I guess. I don't know what you're hoping to accomplish there, but it seems kind of crazy to me. And so we're already on our way. We get there, my wife says, I'm going to sit on the visitor side. You go sit on the home side. We'll just see what's going on. Well, I sit on the home side, and in the first inning, the guy right in front of me is trying to intimidate my son by acting all crazy. And not just, there's a difference between, there's a close play, the umpire says that player was safe, the fans say, no way, he was out. And then there's some complaining. That's always going to happen. But it's about going beyond that, making it personal. That's not acceptable. The league has chosen umpires. They've put them in charge. These are teenagers. You're an adult who's supposed to have a certain level of self-respect for the way you behave. And in the first inning, after the first inning, my son was scanning the crowd looking for me because he knew I was going to be there, and they have like 2 minutes to just stand around while they wait for the teams to switch. So he's looking for me, and the guy sitting in front of me had been obnoxious in the first inning. I didn't say anything. I'm just listening. I'm like, what is this guy's deal? And my son's looking over there, and this parent yells, go ahead and stare all you want. I'll stare right back. We can do this all day. I later asked my son, were you even aware of this guy? He said, no, I didn't even know about this. And he's yelling at him, trying to get his attention. The next inning, it got more hateful and more hateful. And why do we always get this umpire? And just all this stuff. I'm just sitting there. They switch sides again. My son and all the other umpires are standing in a group waiting, and they're chatting, I guess. He's waving, stands up, and he's waving at my son, and he's yelling at him, and he's pointing at him, and he's making it personal. As the inning's about to start, I said, hey, man. And he turns around. I said, are you just going to scream and yell at the umpire all night? And he said, if he's bad, I'm going to tell him he's bad. And I said, well, we're at a little kid's game, and I think you should have a little bit of self-respect and maybe shut your mouth. And I'm not an aggressive or confrontational person, but that's about the limit of what I normally am willing to say. And he kind of grumbled, and then he was a lot quieter the rest of the way. I think a lot of people heard the conversation. I don't know how many of them knew who I was, but there wasn't a lot of other drama. There were hateful things said, like hundreds of pitches are thrown at one point, and you click balls and strikes. At one point, he didn't click one of the pitches, and he had the count wrong one time in the whole game. And the fans on the side I was on were yelling, "You can't be an umpire if you don't know how to count." And like, "This is ridiculous. Get him out of here." And just like crazy. And I didn't say anything else the rest of the time. I can't fight my son's battles for him. But when one specific guy is crossing the line, I'm going to say, "Hey, what's your deal?" And that's what I did. But I'm not going to follow my son if he wants to umpire. He's going to have to fight his own battles. I can't go to all these games. It's not my place to do that. But my wife's on the other side, and my daughter's over there. And the side I'm on is the team that was winning by a lot. So they're not as upset. They're being a little bit hateful, but they're not as upset because they're clearly going to win the game. The other side is coming unglued. And there's one specific guy, once again, this guy's my age, and he's standing up by the concession stand. And there's a little box where the umpires can come back, and there's a little cubby hole, and the extra baseballs go there, and he can put his drink there. And between innings, when he walks over to get his drink, that guy will harass him. And my wife's standing right there and can hear this guy harassing him and making these comments. And at halfway through the game, they're going crazy because they're losing and they didn't like this call. The other side liked the call. That's how that goes. And my wife, there was a moment where her voice could be heard, and she said, "If anybody thinks they could be a better umpire, maybe they should sign up and go umpire." I want to pause this and throw in one more important thing that I forgot to say. And while I'm saying that, you can watch some footage of me volunteering my time and my equipment to do some repair work on a local baseball field that my son would never play on. All of these leagues are volunteer run, and I have ran one of these leagues, and I've coached these teams, and I've been to the yearly meetings that are open and everyone is invited, and nobody comes. You get just a handful of people who want to be involved in making things better. So what a child does is they do not participate in the organization of the event that they were invited to participate in. But then after the fact, they try to influence it by screaming and yelling at a teenager. What a man or an adult woman would do is step up and get involved. You literally can be an umpire. You can do umpire training. You can prep the fields. You can organize the rules. You can go to the president of the Little League and say, "I have some complaints about the way these games are being umpired," and be part of the solution. Or you can sit off to the side and try to bully and intimidate a younger kid. Because it's a lot easier to complain about something than it is to actually do something. Umpiring is tough. Those kids can barely throw the ball to home plate. So when they come in, they're coming in at a drop angle where a ball can hit the ground at the catcher but cross through the strike zone. And most of the pitches aren't strikes. You got to call something a strike. It's a tough job. And some of the rules are complicated in situations where maybe there's an infield fly rule called and the batter runs into the runner. The runner, base runner, runs into the fielder. Is that interference or obstruction? And some of these things, you have to make like a split-second decision about a complicated set of rules. And it's a tough job. But it's a tougher job when there are 100 people screaming at you. And so my wife makes this comment, maybe you should go out there and umpire if you think you can do it better. And she started getting yelled at on the stands. She said, "If you're rooting for the other team, you need to bleep and bleep go over and sit on their side." Well, I said, "Well, I'm not rooting for either team. I don't know any of these kids that are playing." And One woman, the same woman who confronted my son before the game, went over there and ran into her and kind of pushed her and acted like it was an accident right after she said something. And it got really hateful over there. And my wife called and told me that, and I walked over there, and some guy said, that umpire better get an escort out of here. So, just a reset in case anyone's skipped ahead or hasn't caught up to the situation. We've got some teenagers umpiring a baseball game for 9 and 10-year-olds, and somebody's dad is threatening to catch him in the parking lot. And I don't even know what they're upset about. I think there were some plays at home plate that were close. I have no idea. I think they're mad because their team was losing, and you can't be mad at your kid because you love your kid, and you know the coach is on your side. You gotta be mad at somebody. And I think any of these individual people might behave in a reasonable manner until one person yells and somebody else yells, and that gets your adrenaline up. And over the years, I've found myself wanting to chime in and do the same thing at high school games. I used to never say a word at any of the games. Then after years, I started to complain with the rest of the crowd and realized how ridiculous it actually is when you think about how hard of a job that is to be the umpire, to be the referee. I think they deserve better. So, the behavior at this game was crazy. But if my son wants to be involved in baseball, he's going to have to learn to deal with this. It's his problem. We talk about how to handle it. But what I see is other places in society where the same thing happens, where maybe one person would be rational, but a crowd is irrational. And an example is like bullying at school. There's a tremendous amount of bullying that happens in schools. It can be anything or nothing. Because within social groups, they break up and they will pick on people. And I've been told about a lot of bullying, and there's not much you can do about it. Where like, it seemed like when I was younger, we would just punch each other. Like we got in fist fights. And it wasn't that big a deal, but it's different now, I guess. And they will just constantly verbally abuse each other. And I've been telling my kids, you're about through this. My son's graduated. My youngest child has 1 year left. And I say, in the real world, people won't behave this way. If you get a job, no one's going to make fun of your sneakers or your acne or you're too short or you're too chubby. If you go to a job and you're nice and you try to do your job, people will be nice to you and they'll treat you with respect because they're adults. And I'd like to believe that's true, and then I go to a Little League baseball game and I see grown men wanting to fight teenagers over what? Over what? It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm getting worked up about it, and I want to end this on a lighter note. But one more thing to tie in is when you have the political unrest and the rioting and the violence and those type of things, it's mob mentality. An individual person knows better, but a crowd will do anything. And so if you're ever that person in the crowd, say, what I'm going to try to remember is don't let that embolden you to do something that doesn't fit within your character. We all have to answer for our decisions at some point. And it's just something to think about. Man, that turned into a real gloomy video, didn't it? I didn't want it to be, but it's bugging me. I had to speak my mind. Now let's tell the funny story. So my daughter calls me last night, and she's going to the drive-in movies. She goes to a gas station She calls me, says my car's broken. I said, okay, I'm on my way. As I'm walking around to get my wallet and keys, I said, what's going on? She said, well, we went to the gas station. We come back out. The car will start, but the steering wheel's locked up. The brakes locked up. And whenever I put the car in drive, it goes backward. I said, okay, no problem. We got a steering problem, a brake problem, and a transmission problem. See you in a little bit. I'm driving over there. It's like a 40-minute drive. And thinking, man, I didn't bring a trailer. I'm either going to have to call a wrecker late at night and pay, or because I'm not going to fix her transmission in the parking lot, or I'm going to have to come back and get my trailer and put my winch back on because I don't have the winch on it, and then try to winch her car up there, and it's going to be 3 in the morning before I get this thing home, and then I've got to pay to get it fixed and all this hassle I'm going to have. And I'm thinking about her description. None of those things adds up. What the world is going on with this car? So I get over there. She hands me the keys. I get in, turn the key. Nothing happens. I look. The dash lights are on. The dome light comes on. The radio comes on. Everything's coming on. Doesn't seem to have a battery problem. But the starter's not even turning over or even clicking like you normally would get a clicking from the starter if you have a dead battery. So it acts like the starter's not getting connection. Or there's some switch, like it'll only start if it knows it's in park, and the switch isn't telling it it's in park, or some kind of an electrical problem like that. And I'm sitting in the seat, and I'm thinking about these things, and I said, but that doesn't add up to what she just told me. Something else has happened now that didn't happen before, because she said she started it and backed it up. And I can tell that she's not in a parking spot. She's backed up. I'm like, how'd the car get back here? She said, I drove it backward, but it was in drive. That doesn't make any sense. So I thought, well, I'm just going to find out why it won't crank. So I hook up jumper cables just in case. And I'm, wiggling the connections, see if I got a loose connection on the battery. I put jumper cables on it and go back around and get in the seat. Still won't do anything. I said, are you sure that you started this car? She said, yeah. She goes, look, Dad, it's started right now. The dash lights are on. Nothing else is happening. So what do you mean it started? She said, yeah, see the lights? That means it's started. I said, no, honey, that doesn't mean it's started. That means you have the key in the accessory or the on position. If it starts, you'll hear a noise that sounds like an engine. She goes, well, I knew it wasn't making the normal noise, but I didn't know what that means. Well, what it sounds like it means is that she turned it to the on position and it didn't start, but rather than waiting to see if it started or not, she just tried to put it in drive, but she accidentally put it in neutral. It started rolling backward and she had no power steering. And so I got under the car, looked at the starter, and then I noticed a wire hanging off to the side, and that wire had come off of the starter. And so I put the wire back on the starter, car started up. Nothing is wrong with the car, except the wire came off with the starter. And she called me to let me know about her front end issue, and her brake issue, and her transmission issue, and just starter wasn't turning. So it's kind of story about the kind of problems that make you feel good because you can solve them for your kids. And the kind of problems that you wish you could solve for them, but you know you can't. They've just got to fight with those problems their whole life because that's just how life goes. And it's disappointing, but there's nothing we can do about it except for don't be that person on the other end. When someone else's family member is coming home and say this person at work is really mean and I'm dealing with this, don't be the reason that someone else has to go home and tell that story. I'll do my best. I appreciate you taking time to watch this video. I'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.